Go for it. Okay. So several people are looking in at the moment, including Katie. So we now come to decision reports from the Chief Executive and staff. C1, adoption of the committee's terms of reference and schedule of meetings for 2023. We do just have to do a double check that we've got all the names correctly, and we may do that in a minute. But initially, I'd like to invite Amanda if there's anything she would like to elaborate or add to or draw to our attention.
Presuming you've all read the report, report's brief. If there are any questions you have been a few phone calls and conversations and a couple of down meetings with some of you on the terms of reference. Alistair, I did hear what you said earlier regarding what was said in the minutes of the last meeting regarding a more comprehensive analysis. I do believe it's not in this report. There was some discussion of having a review after 6 months of the meetings. And you see it, the teaching is right. So I don't know if that's something that councillors still want to consider.
Thank you. So, do I have a mover to adopt the 2023 committee's terms of reference, schedule of ordinary meetings for council and committees, subject to us checking the correct names in just a minute? I do.
No, before you go there, I just wanted to ask, could we perhaps to proceed with this, because there are some parts of the paper that I'm not comfortable with, and I'd like to talk about those, and maybe it might be beneficial if we go through the paper and then say yes, we like that or not. Maybe I'm not sure what other. There are a couple of the committees that I sort of go, I'm not quite sure whether this fits in the way it's structured.
Okay, thank you. Nevertheless, we won't unless we have a mover to adopt them. We won't be having a discussion. So sorry, receive them.
Well, receive them.
Adopt the committee's terms of reference and schedule of ordinary meetings.
Your Worship, I think there's some elements in there that we would like some clarity around. Certainly I would, there's a couple I've highlighted here, and obviously there's a couple you've highlighted as well. So before we actually adopt them, would it be better to have the discussion?
Okay, then let's.
Could I propose that we receive the paper?
Yep.
Then have the discussion and then decide whether we adopt it or not.
I have a seconder. Okay, thank you. That's good, Ray.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's then move page 42, and we've got the council terms of reference there. Does anybody have a comment on page 42? Okay, let's move to page 43, which is the Maori Standing Committee terms of reference. And I don't think this is greatly altered from the past, is it?
So can I just ask a question in terms of the Maori Standing Committee? It was just a section about grant funding, giving Maori Standing Committee the authority to manage grant funding. Do we actually allocate a budget for grant funding for Maori Standing Committee?
Amanda.
Yes, they did get one last year, but not this year, and they still have some funds left over. And we are advocating to be allocated to the grant funding in the next annual as the community boards, but they do have some.
Excellent, thank you.
So, sorry, can I just get that confirmation again, Amanda? So you said that they got it last year?
Yeah,
or was it the year?
Not this current year, not the current financial year. Yes, there wasn't any grant funding this current financial year. It started on the 1st of July, but there was a grant given to the first year of the LGP. but not on the second or third.
Perfect, so
Do you know how much that amount was?
I- Off the top of my head.
Okay.
Sorry, and just for clarity, under the Finance Committee terms of reference, we've added a delegation to the Finance Committee to be able to, because the Finance Committee assesses and approves community youth grants.
Yes.
But we've added a delegate power to act that says the ability of the Finance Committee to sub-delegate to community boards and Maori Standing Committee grants consistent with their terms of reference. Right, so, that gives a power for that committee to delegate down grants or to the community boards or to the
Maori Standing Committee.
Maori Standing Committee. So you need that ability for them to.
No, that's great.
In these, there are a number of mirror actions. So
Yeah.
just showing you the linkage between those two things.
Yes, thanks, councillor Elams.
Just on page, page 46, under meetings. Referred to Assets and Services Committee, as opposed to Infrastructure and Customer Service for the Maori Standing Committee.
Where are we?
So, sorry, are we on page 46?
Yeah, it's still Maori Standing Committee, yeah.
I'm looking on Stella.
Yeah, the Māori Standing Committee haven't yet reviewed their terms of reference, and as a committee of council, it is up to council to approve them, but we like them to be involved in the writing and reviewing of their terms of reference. So they haven't had capacity to do that yet, so we're basically putting forward their current terms of reference, give them an opportunity to review them and update them, then they'll probably come back to council, who has delegated that responsibility to approve an updated version.
And through Mr. Mayor, the Maori Standing Committee reviewed this terms of reference and approved this last year. So this is very current in terms of them having a good shift over. So it's not like an old one that's been sitting around for a decade. Okay, so it's very important. They went to a lot of trouble to review this and you know, so.
Thank you, councillor Maynard.
With regards to their being a part of each of these committees and being able to attend and speak but not vote, I'd like that to be looked at. I would like the Māori Standing Committee to perhaps be able to have more powers.
Amanda will answer that.
Can I just point out?
At that level, I'm not talking about them voting when it comes to here, but when they're sitting on a committee.
Every one of our committees under the membership has a nominated representative from the Maori Standing Committee as determined by that committee. So they would be appointed under the provision of the Act, which says that these are specialist advisors who have the right to vote.
No, it's literally says here, council delegation to attend and speak but not vote, that's at council meetings. Planning and Regulatory Committee, delegation to attend and speak but not vote. Assets and Services Committee, delegation to attend and speak but not vote. Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, delegation to attend and speak but not vote.
Could I
Yes, please, thanks.
if you remember, last triennium, we talked about this and we wanted
Pete.
it to have the chair of the Maori Standing Committee or whoever was appointed to have voting rights on each of the committees that they would be represented on. But that was put down and we would deal with that as part of the representation review because it was quite a big change in
No, so what
government act, I think.
So just for clarity, so we'd go to the page on page 47, the Strategy and Policy Committee. This is an example. And if you go to the membership at the bottom, it has a nominated representative from the Maori Standing Committee as determined by the Maori Standing Committee. So in all the committees, you can have a voting member of the Maori Standing Committee where that's present. It's doing what you've asked us to do.
But that's not what the terms of reference are saying.
But they're the old ones. So they still need to be reviewed and reflected to to match what the new terms of reference for all the committees say.
I just wanted to raise it because Harry had said these were right up to date, and I just want that to be noted that it's up to date, but apart from this part, which hasn't been looked at. So that as the council needed to look at it, right? So it needed to come here for us to look at, so.
Thank you, Amanda.
It's the last version, the Māori Standing Committee haven't had an opportunity to look at these. So it's to match what we've got, new terms of reference for the new committees.
Right.
And the next step would have for it to go back. So we basically just put these ones in front of you because you have to approve some terms of reference. They haven't had a meeting opportunity to approve their terms of reference yet. It's just the order of meetings, it's not the nothing to do that. These will be updated, but early in the year.
So would it be safe to say that they're provisional TORs for Maori Standing Committee?
Mhm.
No, they are operative.
They're operative, okay.
Until
The key point, is understanding, but the point is that she wants members of the Māori Standing to be on the committees and be able to vote.
Yeah.
And
Whereas at
so
at the moment,
you adopt, say, for instance, the strategy of policy committee, and you adopt that membership that allows them to be on that committee and vote.
And we then need to go back and update the Māori Standing Committee terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
reflect that.
But I
Moving documents, aren't they? So we could do that.
we will,
Yeah.
I think it is very simple for us right now to amend page 46 so that it omits the 4 lines that start council delegation to attend. Just leave them out. And do we need anything more than to note that at this stage, Amy? Do I need a motion to agree to that?
I think we're going to group all of the changes.
Right, okay,
And,
thank you. So you've got that one? Thank you very much. Okay, so any more on page 46? Okay, thank you. Page 47, policy. Thank you, councillor.
So, Mr. Mayor, this is the one that you and I have discussed. I'm really struggling to see the benefit of this committee. Given that setting direction, they are all statutory requirements. So, you can't set a direction against a statutory requirement. So the planning rules that occur are going to occur by statute. So I'm not quite sure what this will do in terms of new policies and bylaws. They have to be they are council bylaws are by law are a council responsibility. They can't be sub-delegated. I'm correct with that, aren't I, Amanda?
So they're under the power of recommendation.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And then when I look at the frequency every 8 weeks, I just think that's a hell of a lot of staff work for something that's actually not really required. And I understand what you're trying to do, in that, but I'm just thinking that a lot of the stuff that you're asking it to do there, setting direction, so that's covered by legislation. Understanding the priorities, well, that's sort of a nothing line. It doesn't actually give any guts to anything. I just think there's going to be a lot of staff work involved in supporting this committee without actually achieving anything and making any tangible decisions. If you wanted to go down this line, then certainly not 8 weeks, but at least, maybe quarterly might be more. And if we look at the planning and regulatory committee that occurred in the last 3 years, I think, and maybe the staff could back me up on this, but you could have probably done that quarterly and still achieved everything we achieved anyway, because there's generally those committees lasted about half an hour, and the amount of staff work that went into that just was not proportional to the outcome of those committees. So this one I've just got a bit of a problem.
You, councillor.
So I had a conversation with you yesterday about strategy and policy and certainly planning and regulatory, because I didn't see anywhere within the current committee structure where planning and regulatory was proposed. And I think this current triennium, for instance, we're dealing with a whole raft of issues such as RMA reform and Wairarapa Combined District Plan. We've obviously got bylaws that are included in strategy and policy, but there needs to be some emphasis placed on planning and regulatory. And I don't actually see it in any of the committee structures that you've proposed at this stage. So.
So can I just pick you up so you don't think the line about adoption of bylaws is strong enough?
Setting a direction and monitoring and progress.
No, power to recommend to council changes.
Whereabouts?
So it's just above item 4.
Power to recommend council adoption of annual plan and long-term plan changes and the adoption of new policies and bylaws. They're not, well, it's a fairly broad, I guess, generic approach to it.
But please amend the wording to capture exactly what you feel.
I think it's really important that there is some committee structure that identify regulatory framework around planning and regulatory. I think,
Right.
I don't know how. Yeah, I mean, Amanda might have a comment, but I'm just not sure. I don't actually see. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
Would you like?
I propose then,
I'll just
Do you
allow.
want me to clarify? So,
Yeah.
it was intended in the setting direction, the monitoring program of statutory planning activities that will include things like the geospatial plan, the master plan.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of directional documents in the planning area that would sit here. That's
So the spatial plan and the Warrap Combined District Plan.
district plan and the.
Sit within.
Yeah.
They're not identified though. And they're overarching tools that we use, obviously, for planning.
But it's statutory planning activities the council undertakes. So that was, so we could amend that, such as the annual plan, long-term plan, district plan, geospatial, we could add all those. But it was implied in the statutory planning activities.
Okay.
I didn't want to name them all in case I left one out, specifically to cover the
Well, I think
you're making.
when we're doing terms of reference up like this, that we do identify the areas of responsibility.
Yes, I agree.
Within that. And I think if we're going to include that in there, it really should have a regulatory component and a planning component in there.
But can you?
So if we add those additional ones, with regards to the plan, like the district plan and the geospatial plan in that first bullet point, you'd like a whole new bullet point as well that actually hits regulatory.
could I please suggest that this one gets parked, the staff do more work on it and we bring it back because it's not critical. This is not a critical one to the functioning of council in the next 8-10 weeks.
Yeah,
I understand your importance of this.
Yeah.
Maybe it needs a bit more thought and a bit more work on it. So let's send it back to.
Let's put it another way. We can adopt them as they are and still amend them. This is not a set in stone forever. And I think even today we have seen how our meeting here would have moved a lot more quickly if we'd had more coordination around, for example, what the community board, Martinborough Community Board, were wanting with respect to lights in the square, combined with the sort of work that the chief executive referred to as had already been happening. And I think if there had been an intermediary body that had taken all of those things on board, spent a little bit of time on it, we would have got through one of our businesses of item. Well, I mean, for a start, I think we all noticed the fact that there was a meeting minute that was well out of date, for example. I think we could have fixed up things vastly better and we would have operated here vastly more efficiently. So I'm more than willing to take on the suggestion that we come back to the next meeting with an amendment that picks up Councillor Roll's suggestion. But I do think it's
I mean, I might be overreacting a little bit, but I'd quite like to hear from Amanda in terms of reference around that. Or Russell. Okay, Russell, yeah.
No, two questions have arisen from Councillor Plummer and Councillor Rolls in terms of a purpose, in terms of strategy need from Councillor Plummer and from Councillor Rolls, the importance of clarity around committees and capturing key content of work for delivery. I think what councillors need to think on, further to what Harry has mentioned, is that in terms of considering strategy and policy, we have existing strategy documents that aren't going to go away. We've got the spatial plan and further South Wairarapa spatial plan. We've got the LTP. We've got the district plan. So your little dilemma is to clarify where those sit. Should they sit in strategy and policy? You have to also counterbalance and look at the need for what's the purpose of climate change and planning, because Councillor Rolls is trying to find a place for recognition of need around
Regulation.
planning and related wider, for example, wider growth planning topics. So you have to look at the interplay between those committees in terms of where you want to land them.
Yeah, thanks, Russell.
We could very easily just amend the first bullet point, key responsibilities, saying set a direction and monitoring progress of statutory planning and regulatory activities the council undertakes.
Great. That's simple.
And that would make it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that'll be fine.
But would,
That.
That was easy, wasn't it?
but would we include,
Let's have a debate.
Yeah.
can we still have annual plan, long-term plan, district plan?
Yeah.
So such as, and have them geospatial plan, just so then that way, anyone that's looking that might want to know where the geospatial plan, which one of our committees it sits under, they'll be able to find it.
Yeah, that, yes.
Yeah.
So we did amend it such as the,
Does that limit?
No, no, because it's such as.
it's because the wording is such as. It doesn't end up just those things.
Yeah. Hey,
I would also like to withdraw this committee until we've done more on it, because I think it is very important. I think to work out how it would help, like what we had experienced earlier today, how to make sure it is structured properly so it could help that kind of cohesion. And I just, from what I'm reading here, I just don't get the feeling that that's anywhere near that yet. So I just think it's so important to get it right. Put it forward. I would rather withdraw it until we've got it.
Councillor Elams.
Yeah, I was putting my hand up to support Amanda getting up to speak and have some input. Well, I could see from the sense.
Just a note on the regulatory space, is it's governed by legislation largely. There's not a huge amount of decision making you guys need to do in the regulatory space. It's regulation. So there's more information, FYI, we can create mechanisms like the CEO report where we put some information on how much regulatory work we're doing, but it's not a decision-making space. So that's just that governance operational as well. I think the other thing about this committee, and this is just a consideration for you, is we've got some very high-level recommendations in this committee. So things like the annual plan, the annual report, long-term plan, and that they recommend to council to adopt. So that means a small number of you then be making largely the decision, recommending to council that a key decision that is the legislative responsibility of council then has to be made. I don't know how comfortable you will feel with that being a delegation. It's just something to consider.
Which is probably better to be done by the full council, right? So it's probably better to be done by the full council.
If I can just pick up that first point, if you look at the Local Government Act, the mayor has responsibility for leading work on the annual plan or the long-term plan. Now, the question is, how does the mayor do that? What the mayor wishes to do is to share the responsibility with the committee chairs of the other committees, so that we make sure that every part of the council is getting heard. That certainly does not stop the process of having workshops, for example, other meetings, and undoubtedly making sure that the council as a whole is very, very comfortable with what's coming out. Yeah. Right, Councillor Plymouth.
Yeah, look, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm very much in Kay's camp. I think, I can understand what you're trying to do here. I think we just need to take some time and actually get it right. And I support Kay's proposal that we withdraw this particular committee, bring it back once the staff have had a chance to sit down with you and bring a bit more meat around it, so that we understand exactly where you are and what you're trying to achieve here. Just, it's not that it's going away, but it's actually getting it right. So that's
Well-
certainly I propose.
I would certainly have liked this committee to be operative before February so that we can streamline what comes to the February meeting. For example,
It's almost like what you're talking about as a mayoral advisory committee of the heads of the chairs of the other committees. Like a way to feed up towards you. Is that what you?
well, my parallel was like cabinet, but
Right.
Central government, yeah.
It's less about us decision making or about our governance, but more about making sure that there's a
Our ducks are lined up.
coming from the whole council to you.
yeah, and that we're not clashing sort of one moment with lights and Martinborough Square and another moment with all the work that's been done around pedestrian safety to date.
So the other option is to make this a working group rather than a committee.
That's that's probably a better idea.
And I say that in the context that if it finds, you set it up that way and you find would be more effective as a committee, it gives you that option of stepping it up by resolution.
Right.
You know, so it gives
So
you.
what
halfway
would
house.
what would our resolution be at this instant then?
Well, you wouldn't adopt this, but you simply set it up with.
Right, okay. So you and I have the,
Well, you don't
Ability
need,
to do
you're
that.
not appointing it as a
No.
council or committee, so it
Yeah.
doesn't need, it just lie on the table.
We
as
just do it.
suggested, and we just set it up that working group
Right.
with this terms of reference.
okay, so in that case, councillor Plummer recommends that we withdraw page 47. And I will second that. All in favour, please say aye.
Right?
And that saves us the problem of, do we get the membership?
Good outcome.
Instantly. So if we go to page,
In actual fact, it frees you up to actually discuss anything you wanted to discuss as well.
okay, so page 48, the Finance Committee terms of
Wait,
reference.
sorry, before to take up on Colin's point of view, though, we probably still do need something to look at the regulatory issues that might come up in Russell's area from time to time. So, you know, when we had the planning and regulatory, it was the regulatory one that probably took up the most time. And maybe that's something you might want to think about, Mr. Mayor. Maybe a quarterly meeting on that would probably be enough, wouldn't it, Harry?
Well, if you don't have the committee, it can't do that.
No, but that's what I'm saying. We probably need
The default is
a committee of some sort.
the default is it comes to council.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
that. I could just come to council and that way everyone knows.
That's exactly.
And where it's,
Yeah.
it's where the major.
Another committee in.
No, I just- no, I don't.
Okay. Councillor Olds, any comments?
No, I was reasonably comfortable with it. It's, it is what it is. It's,
Right.
too arduous, in terms of workload, and I'm sure that, we'll, develop a relationship with our CFO over a period of time.
Wow.
Can
Excellent.
I just say though, you probably need to remove the stuff about the strategy and policy,
About the what?
You'd need to remove the key
to
responsibility.
collaborate with the strategy and policy committee points.
The point,
Oh, absolutely, yeah, the stage, yeah, they would have to be amended, yeah. I'm just wondering if we could ask Karen if she has had the opportunity to have a quick look through. I haven't spoken to her. Is she reasonably comfortable with?
In terms of the finance committee, the annual report should be included in that committee. It's a historic documentation. The annual plan and the long-term plan are strategic documents. So the main work of that would be strategy committee, working group. And that the audit itself, which comes up later, the audit is a key component of finance. So I'm just wondering, the benefit of having to combine finance, audit and insurance committee, because the two overlap constantly. But at least at the annual report, that there should be included in the terms of key responsibilities. And the provision for bringing to council unbudgeted expenditure authorisation and recommendation to council, which may go through another committee, but it really comes to the one.
Yeah,
So can I just clarify, under 2, you're suggesting a further dot point, which is reviewing the annual report, or
Yes, the annual report should be looked at by the finance committee. It's a
Yep.
historic document.
Yep.
Largely based on financial statements.
Yes. Right, so,
And that then includes the audit component. of
yes, thank you. Yeah, great.
So if that's the case, then maybe it should be the finance and audit.
No,
Yeah,
no, most definitely not, but we'll come to that. So, but we can absolutely include the financial audit aspect here.
And can I just ask around the power to act around the approve the community grants? That used to be something in a smaller committee, not necessarily at finance. It's a small component of business and operations. And it seems a small thing to bring to the committee.
Amanda can comment on that.
I can talk to the grants, so there was a comment made as well.
Yeah, I was, right.
The new grants subcommittee, they had the remit of about 200K each year. There would be 2 rounds of funding that my team would manage the applications and stuff of, and then there would be 2 days of hearings. So you have to sit for 2 days in meetings, hear submissions from community groups that want grants, and then decide through a determination process around who gets those grants. That's effectively 4 full days a year of meetings. It's quite a big workload. We don't have there wasn't a subcommittee set up. There could be a subcommittee set up. We just don't have terms of reference for that subcommittee. And there is a recommendation for the grants paper on what you could do with some money.
So just a quick question. You're suggesting that we should remove that from the finance committee and it should be a grants committee structure as such.
Yeah, or so.
Could it be a subcommittee of the finance committee?
It could be a subcommittee of ministry finance.
Yeah, okay. How do you feel about that?
No, that's perfect.
Yeah.
If you're happy.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with that, yeah. Yes, if the subcommittee, we could broaden it.
To create a subcommittee.
I'm just going to talk to that one if I may.
Yes, please do.
You and I have discussed, it's probably not appropriate I'm on that one because if I'm on the audit and risk one,
Yeah, but I think it's okay to have one. Ella.
I'm suggesting take me off this one,
Okay.
leave me on the audit and risk because I don't want to audit and risk my own self.
Why not?
I have enough risk today, as it were.
Want to come off the finance one?
Yeah.
Oh, thank God for that.
I suggest perhaps Martin Bosley goes on in my place on that one as
Okay.
someone who's got a good financial background.
And so subject is approved. Is consent.
So subcommittee for the grants.
Yeah, he's not here. He can't talk against it, so he's not here.
I think every committee has the power to set up a subcommittee.
Yeah.
So I don't think you need to decide it. I don't think you need to specify. You already have that power. Okay, so the finance terms of reference are.
Yep.
Okay, we come to infrastructure.
Just to be clear what we've changed, which is,
Yeah.
okay, so just so we're,
Thank you.
that's right, so we're, the first 2 bullet points remain. The 3rd bullet point is being deleted but replaced with, the annual. Karen, what wording do you want for the annual report?
The annual report is to come to this committee.
Yeah.
Yeah. To review the annual report.
Because whole of council have to approve it.
Yep.
Yep.
But it has to be reviewed at some.
Okay, so review the annual report on the 3rd bullet point. And we had discussion about the ability to sub-delegate in the grants. The committee has that power to do that anyway. So that's a summary, Amy? There wasn't changes?
And obviously the strategy and policy working committee. Now
Oh, yes, sorry.
also
I guess, sorry, is this committee approving all unbudgeted expenditure of all other subcommittees?
does not have no delegation, no.
Doesn't have a delegation.
No.
Whole of council.
Yeah, that's,
Mhm.
Yeah, the monitoring of,
Infrastructure and community services have that delegation as well.
yeah, and we'll come to that next. Yeah. No, we don't want one committee having a delegation and having to go to another committee to actually, it would just be nonsense.
And just as a typo, the numbering down the side of that page is up.
Sorry, speak up.
Oh, just as a typo, the numbering on the side of the page is weird. Mine goes 1, 2, 1, 3.
Apologies, that's me.
Oh,
Sorry.
I'll make a note. Amanda.
Who's the school?
Oh, that's good. You're not perfect in there. That's
It would be
all.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Former councillor, council had
You're
a
right.
teacher, yeah. It's ridiculous. Spelling.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the changes I have, omitting the last 4 lines on page 46.
Yeah.
Is that what is correct?
Yes.
4 lines there.
So under meeting,
Page 46.
So we'll start council delegation to
Planning
attend and speak,
and
but not vote.
Okay.
So come out.
wanted to get it.
That's what you wanted.
Hang on, sorry.
Amy's just double checking. She's got the right
Back in the multi.
4 lines on page 46 omitted.
But which line's being omitted?
That's the lines under meetings.
So we're actually taking all of those out because don't we want them to be able to say that they can be on all of those?
Yeah,
But that's what the will be over here. So it's in the here. It's in the terms of reference to the other committees. But
Of the other committees, okay, cool.
so we've got a contradiction where we're giving them a vote in the committee delegations here.
Yeah.
But the old terms of reference said, council attend and speak but not vote, which is the point you rose. So we're deleting that from the Maori Standing Committee terms of reference. So there's no ambiguity. They can vote on the committees.
Yeah, sorry, and then,
Sorry.
planning and regulatory activities in the first bullet point of page 47.
No. So
no, because
now
the whole thing's gone.
Oh, sorry, that's, sorry.
Yeah.
I wrote-
Yeah.
Are you doing well?
yeah.
Numbering on page
48.
removing all references to the strategy and policy committee.
Yeah.
Addition of, to review the annual report on page 48.
48.
Yes.
Under key responsibilities, then remove councillor Plummer as a member of the finance committee, add councillor Bob to the finance committee as a member, subject to his approval.
Yes.
Let's cover that off.
Okay, so infrastructure and community services, this is a combination of what had originally been proposed as a result of consultation between councillors Aid and the deputy mayor. Now, would anybody like to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just on the power to act, I've given a lot of thought about the financial authorities here. And the first point, I'm not really sure, I'm not comfortable about the first couple of words, unbudgeted expenditure. Because that's absolutely, we should be there to look after emergency expenditure. But if it's just unbudgeted expenditure from reserves, I think that is actually a council responsibility.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm not sure other councils would be comfortable with us just approving willy-nilly 100,000 of unbudgeted expense, unless it's an emergency. So
I didn't see the and in there. I must admit, I probably would have raised the same thing.
Well, I'll just invite the chief executive, then I'll come to the chief financial officer.
So there's 2 things going on in here. One is the emergency expenditure up to 400K, right? So, but there's also unbudgeted expenditure from reserve funds, so specifically from reserve funds. Okay, that's the intent. So this is to cover situations like in the last council. I mean, what we're trying to do here is try to get decision making made at the committee level, so it doesn't get relitigated at council. Now, there will be, obviously, anything over the 400K will need to come to council. So an example of where unbudgeted expenditure from reserve funds would be things like the Five Rivers Medical Centre. So it means that this committee can make those decisions based on officers' advice and all that type of thing.
So,
So those are the two ideas, is that the committee can, subject to advice, approve unbudgeted expenditure only from reserve funds.
And I suppose that, I'm not, for myself, if I wasn't on this committee, I would be particularly uncomfortable, I suppose, because we're talking nearly 3% of rates.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a large chunk of money for a smaller group to make, and we are all responsible for that. So Pip, if you're not on that committee, you're going to be held to account for us spending money.
It's reserve funds, it's not.
It's there, but it's still unbudgeted. It's still right.
Unbudgeted expenditure. I think that is-
I understand what you're trying to do here. So I think we all agree the emergency side, not a problem, because we don't have time to wait in an emergency.
I think that should be specified.
If you're talking unbudgeted expenditure from reserve funds, if you want to agree, I think there needs to be some more rules around that a little bit tightening up of that. And
A lower number.
well, a lower number, but I'm certainly interested in what staff might have to say about where would we use it and what would be the benefit of that, because if it's unbudgeted, that suggests that it's outside of the annual plan. Again, so is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if we're approving money outside of the annual plan, I'm not sure, the other councillors could speak for themselves, but would they be comfortable with a smaller group making that decision on their behalf without any input?
No.
Yes.
Yeah, but if it's an emergency, you can't wait.
Emergency, we can't wait.
You can't wait for council meetings.
So currently, delegated financial policy. That is our current policy. This does not fit into the policy, so the policy. You can't just make an arbitrary decision on a number without considering this policy. And then we can change the policy.
Okay, with that said, could we take that out and as part of the next 6 months, look at that policy, the financial policy, and this, and perhaps add it in down the track if we need to.
So I would figure around the thought. Sorry to contradict my chief financial officer, but we have in the beginning of the report, we anticipated that we wanted this to be able to, the committees to exercise the delegations. So there's a recommendation to anchor the delegations in the committees, which council is proving, and that in effect amends the delegations, but all we have to do is rewrite them. Doesn't need a story to come back, and we've talked through Steph, Amanda, all got the legal advice on that. Okay, so there's a delegation at the front of the paper, recommendation, which says, sorry, this is okay. So on page 31, cover report, the recommendation authorise officer to remove committee delegations from the financial delegations policy and add the following clause to the policy. So if you pass that, then it allows the committees to put these delegations into effect. There you are.
Maynard?
If that happens, I note that there's already 7 members of the council already on this. I'd like to be on there as well, and possibly the other councillors. So perhaps all councillors can be a part of this committee, because I wouldn't be. I'd want to have some input on unbudgeted.
I don't imagine anybody will oppose that.
Yes,
If it's going to be
actually getting rid of the
That's
committee.
will be 10.
All of council committee.
Yeah.
So there's,
Could I just go back to what I said earlier? Can we just perhaps take those few lines out first, have a look at it, get the staff to have a little bit of a look at that, see where that level should sit, come back to us, and we can add it, we can always add it in later, but we want to actually get on to.
So
We could leave it in
to
this.
give effect to that, can I suggest that what you do is you just simply take away the first approve unbudgeted expenditure from reserves funds and add approve emergency expenditure up to maximum 400,000. Because the current delegation for to me is only $20,000
for emergency.
emergency funding.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's no debate about
Be able to get
That's right.
in an emergency, and so the reason for that limit is based on our experience last year around what emergencies and the scale of cost we actually did. So if you want this to be a one-stop shop, so you don't have a 2-step process where it goes to the infrastructure and then goes to council.
Harry, we're not talking about the emergency expenditure. I think everybody around the table is comfortable with that for that very reason. We're talking about the unbudgeted expenditure from reserves outside of the annual plan.
Rebecca's got a question.
Yeah, can I just make a point to that, that isn't the reserve funds all unbudgeted anyway?
No.
Or can't, I mean, they were.
Yeah, because they're not rated, they're grown through either reserve contributions or through a fixed rate or a rate that contributes to them. Rural road reserve,
Structural reserve.
yeah. So when I say they're not budgeted for, the annual contribution is budgeted for, but not the.
No, the purpose. So no, so
The spend is, the infrastructure reserve is spent as part of the annual plan. We
things like
approve,
the Wheels Park, for instance.
We don't spend that all the time. We don't.
no, we don't spend it all,
No.
but it's built in, so it's the renew, that's where we get the renewals from.
Yeah.
So it is in the annual plan to expand
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about here is something that's outside of the annual plan.
Sorry, Rebecca.
So can I suggest a wording just to help, which says approve unbudgeted emergency expenditure up to a maximum of 400K.
Yes. Yes.
Any disagreement with that, please?
I just want to know, I know, so it's only myself, councillor Olds and councillor McCauley who aren't on this. And with regards to that, if it's an emergency or anything like that, yeah, I'd want to be on here.
I don't necessarily need to be on there. I can turn it down. I've got enough on my plate.
Yeah, you do.
What you're thinking of just to attend if this is kind of
We
pending.
can all attend.
We can all attend.
Yeah, and have a.
Yeah. Which is cool, but we're talking about emergency expense. You know, well, that means that you've got to move pretty quickly. So if your name's not on there, are we going to, you know, is it going to go out to all councillors? Because if it is, we may as well all be a part of it.
Your name is on there. I promise.
Well,
No.
it's the members list.
We're going to add it to the members.
Oh, so I'm going to be on here. Okay, yeah, cool. Perfect.
Mandy, you had your hand up? Do you
Yes.
just,
Another thought option is that once you get everyone on council on the committee, it's called the committee of the whole. And you could potentially do something like, this is an option, have a dedicated finance meeting quarterly that is done to council without having a council committee, a finance committee. As an option.
The other, thanks, man. The other thing I would say that if you get too many councillors on, it affects the quorum issue. And if we're going to be talking about this committee actually doing all the legwork, it's a big ask for those of you who, you know, this is not a 2-hour committee. This could well be a whole day committee by the time we go into those sorts of things. And certainly what Martin and I've talked about is actually, this is where the nuts and bolts will get done. And if your concern is just about the emergency stuff.
Yeah, I think it's great. We've got, but also it's the fact that we have, the chair is, you know, as a district, I just note that there's only one from the Martinborough ward that's on here. So it's heavier on, especially with Greytown. And so, you know, I mean, again, if that's the case, then perhaps one of the other councillors from Greytown might want to come off, and I'm happy to go on. Because it's very heavy on Greytown, on the Greytown side. And so, you know, if it comes down to it being looking like we're moving into being full council, so we need to have less. I'm wondering if someone from the Greytown, one of the Greytown councillors might want to come off, so that way,
Well, and
either myself or Kate, I mean, or Kate might feel that she's, you know.
so, yeah, as a note
one
to
of the
that,
floating your boat.
I think Alistair has a lot of experience in this space and a lot of,
Okay.
About skill mix, isn't it?
he's got
Yeah.
actual hands-on in the dirt experience. I think they would be very important people to keep on the committee, but that's 2 out of 3.
When you start getting more people, it goes round and around the table, all these meetings take a lot longer, chewing up more time because more and more people are getting involved.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea, I thought, was to shorten the stuff.
And if it just,
If we could talk to the contents, I think that would be useful. So we've added councillor Maynard's name. We've removed the unbudgeted expenditure from reserve funds. Sorry. Are there any other details on 49 of 50? Yes, thank you, Councillor Rolls.
I was just concerned about moving things to an eight weekly cycle through all the meetings apart from finance, of course, which meets quarterly. And feeling whether or not the gap is just too great at this particular stage.
So that's for the council meetings and the,
Yeah,
right,
all the meetings.
and the,
And I just saw that on the page because I meant to raise it earlier and I forgot.
right, okay. So would you like to raise it now?
So I am raising it now, eight weekly meetings. I don't know how other councillors feel about it. I just feel that the gap is too great. 6 weekly, eight weekly meetings have been tried in the past. The flow of information wasn't as great as it could have been. And I exercise caution that eight weekly gap between council and committee meetings. However, if you've got a good structure in place and good terms of reference, then often that can assist, and particularly around 8 weekly council meetings, because that information is being fed through. So I'd quite like to hear from others.
Okay, I'll invite other councillors, then I'll invite the chief executive. Councillor Woodcock.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to hear from Andrew and his staff what they think about it as far as their work.
We'll come to them, but we're going to hear from councillors first. Councillor Maynard. Councillor Gray. Deputy Mayor.
I have questions around the flow of information. And I wonder if the removal of the Policy and Strategy Committee would be sufficient to then allow for 6 weekly council meetings, if the reduction of those meetings affects the workload enough to return back.
Councillor.
So what I would say, thank you, is that the reason we've gone down the delegation to committees is to enable the work to get done. So the flow of information is still going to occur. And if I use the term that I've got the mayor parroting occasionally, which is really cool, it's up to committees to to interrogate the staff and do the work. And they make recommendations to the council, which then adopts those recommendations. And if you think of it that way, you've still got meetings every 4 weeks, albeit council is in between each council meeting, you've got a detailed committee meeting of whatever the committee may well be. And I've got to talk about the way that the committee days have been set, because they seem to pile on top of each other. But you're still going to have that 4 weekly information flow. It just won't be to the whole council. It'll be to the various committees who we're giving power to act. So I think you're going to find that we're actually a better off structure, and the information flow across the council will be better than what it was under 6 weekly. And we won't be having this every 3 weeks having the same conversation, because councils now will have the ability to act on recommendations from committees, and committees actually have the ability to actually make decisions and keep the work flowing, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Helams.
Fine, thanks.
Okay.
So Alice has summed it up perfectly. I mean, the difference in architecture is that to make this work, we need to have the delegations to the committees to make decisions. The whole thing will fall over if we end up with the committees only, chewing something over and then making recommendations to council and everything gets relitigated. So that's a very different workflow. So it means, like in terms of Stefan's work, he only has to, on the things that are inside that, he only has to turn up to that one committee, right? But the risk is that we end up with things that aren't in the delegations of that committee still coming to council. So we've got it, and so the 4 weeks is actually the timing that is different. So we're not waiting 8 weeks to make a decision. A lot of things, right? That's the point. So the schedule is to have, say it's in an 8 week schedule, then you have the infrastructure committee, paced out in between that 8 week period, and then the council meeting. And so in terms of staff servicing and the ability to actually provide the quality reports, we can make 8 weeks work really well. 6 weeks, and you can see the lead time, we're literally out of a one committee meeting, and we're starting to write reports, X one. And that's a bit that swamps us. There's 2 sides to the equation. Well, there's actually 3 sides to this. There's your own workloads, Remember, you're looking at the committee structures, but there's going to be a range of workshops, extraordinary meetings, particularly in an annual plan, long-term plan year. And believe me, the calendar is filling up really fast. So in terms of your workloads, this is one thing, but you've also got a whole lot of other work that you're going to have to do.
Outside committees as well.
Yeah. And if you look at it last year, we had 55 scheduled meetings and we had 70 meetings of them. So it's all that. Then there's also in your workloads is also where you are delegated by council to attend a committee meeting from, in GWRC or whatever it may be. And those can be really time consuming. So we're trying to look at this in the round about the full workloads that you have. We're trying to look at it from the point of view of good flow of information and ability to write quality advice, not just do things half rushed. And that's probably the most crucial thing. You charge me to provide quality advice and we do that. And then equally, we've sized this based on our capacity of our statutory services staff as well. And so if we went over roughly the 55, we're going to swamp what we couldn't. We'd have to get someone in to actually provide the services, but you swamp the staff at the same time. So that's the three things we've taken into consideration.
See that Mr. Corbett
Yeah.
wants to make a comment, so we'll slip over to him.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. What's operationally what works is that we go to committee with delegation on minor matters. So for example, if it's 40K, which is not emergency, that we needed to spend on the Hanakura track to top up an existing capital grant, $40,000, it's non-budgeted under the current rules that you're talking about, they would have to cancel. Or it will go to a committee that had no delegation, be pressed around, and then go to council. I think also lighting in the square, if you want to approve 30 grand to put solar lights in the square, it's, we're not operating under emergency powers, we can look at that, but I don't think we are. Again, if you don't have a delegation for non-emergency spend in that committee, you refresh it around the committee, then we'll refresh it around council again. That double handling is what wrecks the and slows everything down. So, it's that plus the frequency that makes the system.
I don't see those delegations in our terms of reference though.
You do. So the
under
the powers to act, and there's under the unbudgeted, there's approved activities and unbudgeted expenditure up to 100K outside of the annual plan that do not trigger the significance and engagement policy. So that's the thing that allows you to that committee to make the decision on lighting in a square, for instance.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense. Yeah. Well, I mean, if we've got the delegations in place,
so
and I feel reasonably comfortable.
So that's sorry.
Amanda put a hand up.
Yeah, we'll hear from Councillor Old.
Sorry, I just want to. That second power to act, the 100K outside of the annual plan. I'm not quite sure where you had the 400,000 for the unbudgeted above. So maybe if you wanted to have that from reserves, you bring it to make them both the same, make them 100. Then say 400,000 for emergency works, but 100,000 for unbudgeted works would seem to be keeping it consistent.
I think it's implied, Alistair. So you have,
no, it's not because it's
no. So the
budget expenditure up to a maximum 400.
It means that the 100K you can decide on what source it comes from, whether it comes from reserves or it really goes against the council's bottom line. So it just gives you more flexibility. But that sets that delegation.
I feel like that whole issue could be resolved by just putting a little comma after reserve funds. Does that not read better? Because then it's the two different things, isn't it? So the ability.
Yeah, they are separate things. One's emergency funding and one's unbudgeted.
So if you look at the comma, then we're talking about a budgeted expenditure from reserve fund, comma, and emergency up to 400. And then the next sentence is about the budgeted expenditure being up to 100,000.
Okay. Amanda, please.
It's going to read from the column, but it's actually up to So even though you've said every 8 weeks, when we've designed the calendar, there are some statutory regulations that need to be signed on within certain timeframes. So some of the meeting dates are actually less than 8 weeks because we've got a gap where if we wait 8 weeks, we won't make the deadline. So we've actually got more than 8 weeks speak in the actual calendar.
Some of them were really close.
Some of them are really close because of that reason. And that's just something to consider. The other thing is because you've got some meetings quarterly and some meetings every 8 weeks. 8 doesn't go into 12. So that's so you end up with some of them clashing on the same days. You have to move some of them onto different days. They're not all Wednesdays, which is something I know Pip, who isn't here now, has requested. So it's just something to be mindful of, that there is some days that there will be daily irregularity and there will be less than 8 weeks between some meetings. Time frames that you need to make.
Thank you. Now, I'm keen to move on. I think if we all left, we'd all be reassured. Okay, Karen, this is better be your final comment on this topic. We've got other topics, don't worry.
Just on the approval of budgeted expenditure, I think it's important to know capital expenditure or operating costs, because they're very different, and the sources of the money will come.
Can you raise your voice?
Sorry. Some budgeted expenditure can be capital or operating. So we need to just make that point.
So we just amended to say capital and operating expenditure. Yeah.
And
So
identify the source of the.
Will that not come in the advice the committee gets at the time?
It should.
Yeah.
But it's just a point to note that in the delegation policy currently we separate things from operating.
Right.
So could we sort of just to grab that? So let's add to the first bullet point, which is still reading: approve unbudgeted emergency expenditure up to a maximum 1,000. Includes both capital and operating expenditure. And we add to the approve activities and unexpenditure up to 100K. The similar includes capital and operating expenditure. That's right. So my take is we've landed here, and with the addition of Pip to the members. Yep, those ones.
Okay, are you happy, Amy?
So, for you, Mayor, could we just have a discussion about the chair and the deputy chair? Do we need to?
Yes, so, oh, I don't think we need to do so, but if you to go ahead.
I was just, I have emailed the deputy mayor about that. But just wondering, and I saw that there was some feedback from Harry about how that operated. Could you just
reiterate it? So the suggestion, Robert, was a very good one and quite innovative, was that we could have a co-chair. The split between the committee for infrastructure and the community wellbeing. Unfortunately, when we checked the law only talks about the chair in the singular. It does not have a plural. Therefore, you can't have legally under the LGA a formal co-chair arrangement. So we looked at a workaround, and effectively and it doesn't require to be specified in the terms of reference first of all, but just an explanation. So what Aidan and Melissa have agreed is that Aidan is on paper is the chair and Melissa is the deputy chair. What we do in practice is split the meeting in two, so we construct the agenda so it has infrastructure in the first part and the community wellbeing. At the point in time in the meeting, when the infrastructure matters, Aidan would stand down and the deputy would assume the chair. So we're really trying to be elegant in allowing that to occur. So in practice, you've got a co-chair. The only legal fishhook, and hopefully it never happens, is if you end up with a split vote. So the only person who can exercise a casting vote is the chair, not the person who's sitting in the chair. So that means that if you ended up in a split vote, Aidan would have to resume the chair and exercise his casting vote. for completeness. But what we're trying to do is try to give effect to the intent in the best way we can, given the legal restrictions.
Thank you, Harry. Thanks.
Okay with that?
Very happy.
Can I just ask one other question? With Pip coming on, that changes the numbers. Does that mean the quorum now has to be 5 members?
Yes, it will. It will.
Amanda, is that correct?
It needs to be half
Half
of the
plus.
number is even, more than half of the number is even and half, basically. even.
Right, so it's gone from 7 to 8, so it now has to be 5.
As, sorry.
Thank you. Yes.
Other law, it has to be half plus one.
Thank you.
Very well picked up.
That's much to say before about numbers.
Climate Change and Environmental Committees.
So before we move on to that, I know we've like hammered this to death and you're really keen to move on, but under the key responsibilities of the infrastructure committee, it still talks about collaborating with the strategy and policy committee. Do
Oh,
need
yes,
to
we,
change that out?
yes, thank you. Thank you. We'll.
Out of all of the things, okay.
Thank you. Okay, Climate Change and Environment Committee. After some consultation, Councillor Gray is now the chair. And this is reasonably broad. I believe there is now one thing that is missing, which is when we had the Strategy and Policy Committee, one of its powers to act was to authorise council submissions. Almost invariably, Climate Change Committee will have submissions to do. That's one of the things it does, and therefore I would, which to include under the power to act, to borrow the authorise council submissions to external bodies. I think originally when I put that phrase in, it was to do with the matters under the responsibilities of the committee, not a general one. So I think it's a good thing to put in that we're giving it a delegation to prepare or send submissions on behalf of council in relation to the key responsibilities that this committee has. That too quick?
Amanda has her hand up.
Oh, thank you. I wish you'd put her other hand up. You're putting it up.
The only, I mean, intent, the only issue is that this committee meets every quarter.
Yeah.
They will not have the ability to do that in the timeframes that submissions usually come to us within. So we do have a draft submissions process that we've written. So it's not a submissions policy, it's a submissions process. And basically what it does is it gives flexibility for the decision makers on submissions to be decided whatever relevance there is to which of the committee, and be delegated to Q3. So the mayor, the deputy mayor and the CE. So you can make a decision outside of meetings on submissions in a timely manner.
Yeah. That makes good sense. And the other thing is we can always call an extraordinary meeting. How long would we
try
have?
to avoid it if we could do it quickly?
Okay, right, yeah. Councillor. Okay, thank you.
So are we adding?
Can we just have a hold while we catch up, maybe?
Sorry, so you're under power to act, you wanted to include which bullet points?
Well, the question is, how quickly will the draft policy take effect?
It's a draft process, it's not a policy, but it's something we've implemented under the last training.
Yeah.
And we can bring it to you guys at the next meeting.
In February?
Yeah, in February.
Yeah, leave it at that.
Okay.
Thank you, Alan. So you and I have discussed this one as well, and this is another one that I have a slight problem with. And when I look at it, I understand exactly what you're trying to do and where it sits, but I just don't see any decision making or any thing in the key responsibility. There's nothing there to make a decision or whatever. So it's talking. I understand why we need to take climate change into account, and I think that if you think where we sit in the Wairarapa, we're at the end of the pipeline. And so anything that occurs with climate change here is affected by Masterton and Carterton. And this is a committee that I believe should be a district-wide committee. It needs to have input from the other two councils for the very point that anything it wants to achieve is going to actually largely be dictated or involve the other two councils for some reason or another. Now, in terms of our own policies and things, we can achieve a lot of this by just within our existing committees, by having the staff take climate change and environmental issues into every report that they send to the infrastructure committee or to any of the other committees. But I would really like to see this committee as a district committee.
Now, I absolutely agree with that. And I'm just a little distressed to realise that one of the notes I sent recently about one of the things that had to be added to it. And I've had discussions with Carterton and Masterton on this very point, that what we need to happen here is to move towards that collaborative regional wide thinking about. Do you remember the discussion I had? Yeah. So there's some words that currently are missing, but it picks up exactly the point. There's no point us thinking we can do a whole lot unless we're all doing it together. So totally 100% agree.
The words are missing.
Oh gosh.
Do we need to add them?
Did the other two councils come back to you when you wrote them?
Oh yeah, like
They're in favour of it.
this makes good sense.
Straight away.
So, absolutely. Now, I don't know if anybody's, whether Councillor Gray can find the email.
But I agree.
Yes, sorry.
Can I just, don't disagree, I think a great idea, I just, wonder how this becoming a regional committee then affects the structure, because at the moment there's maybe 5 or 6 of our councillors on this particular committee. If we then become regional, a committee of 15 plus people with the other 2 councils seems quite large. So what would happen to this committee as it stands should it become regional?
Well, I think I think there's a number of possible answers to that, but it won't happen instantly. And potentially, if it went to say something like the Wairarapa Economic Development Group, you would end up with nominations from each council.
2 per council.
And then you would probably invite attendance from a number of other groups as well, like the regional council, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
And then possibly because it's quarterly, you can feed back. So it's feeding back through to your committee, and then, on anything that they might want to make moves on.
So the words from your email to the Masterton and Carterton. So we said, proposing the following sentence in our committee's terms of reference, the power to develop cooperative structures involving the Carterton and Masterton district councils with the aim of developing a wide strategic approach to climate change and the environment, which I thought was very well put.
That should be being in here, and also these others meant to be on them.
Oh, yes, that.
So with the exception, with the agreement from the other 2 councils, does this make this committee moot, and we change it to a one council?
No, you have to have a step A before you get to step B. So this is about creating a structure that we can all work in towards, and then we'll map over to other councils where we can all form into a
Under one umbrella.
So that email to me talks about this committee working towards an overall strategy, not it doesn't suggest coming together in an overall committee. That's not what I heard in what you. So your committee stands but works through us.
Yeah, so I think it's too much to say we will just out of the blue just create a committee that works across all 3 councils straight away. I think this is a good interim step that gives us a framework to build up what it is that we want to do in this space. It's an evolving space. There's new things coming up all the time. So to then.
How do you see this committee then working with the other 2 councils to establish that?
Well, first I'd like to see this committee start. And
I asked that question because if you take the district plan review, for example, there was no structure there. 2 from each council came in, boom, with an independent chair, created the structure then and there. And I just think if we do this step, then we're going to miss an opportunity. because this will take too long to get to the next stage.
So
Unless,
suggestion and wording, that you add to the power to recommend to council, you add a third bullet point, so to advice to council on the possible establishment of a joint Wairarapa committee. Because a decision would require appointment from council to a joint committee, and council would have to establish the joint committee. So the power to recommend to council, that gives you the mandate to actually go forth and join up.
Yeah.
So my suggestion, I'll hand it to Amy. That's to advise, under power to recommend, advice to council on a possible establishment of a joint.
Harry, do you
Yep.
want to just do that first?
Well, okay, are we going to start with you, Amanda? Yours was first.
Oh, Russell and I would say that.
Okay, say the same thing, Russell and Amanda.
We've suddenly realised it's important for councillors to see the wider context, because what work has been done in the recent past, you've had the case of councillor Gibson in the past, contributing actively on behalf of council into the regional group working on climate change, so that they are active in that space. But that's in the realm of district working with regional, remembering that regional council was their responsibility under the regional policy statement to deal actively with issues across the wider region. So they will keep doing their thing. We need to keep doing our thing. So that space was already occupied, but you wanting to somehow strengthen up a future outlook.
So Russell, that committee's been disestablished. It doesn't exist anymore.
It's not a committee, it's a working group.
Yeah, but it doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. So this is, all this is doing is it gives this committee power to act, talk to the other councils to see if they want to establish a joint committee. But it gives it the power to then make a recommendation to council about whether that's the form that everyone agrees on. Because it's a council have to make this decision on a joint committee.
I also want to include the words that Councillor Gray approves on.
Yeah.
Because they're not contradictory, they're complementary.
Yeah.
You can do better. Okay, now we're getting there to lunch, so
Sorry, is that the power to recommend?
yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
powers to recommend.
Going to council.
I think also just to point out that the point of the climate change committee is not just to feed into a cross council thing. It'll be so that we have our own specific
Absolutely.
for our area.
okay, if we come to the Assurance and Risk Committee terms of reference, just one comment. This is not meant to be an audit committee. This is very much focused on risk management. I have taken the liberty of sending our terms of reference off to several people who are qualified directors and provide training to directors to give their comments. There's only one little thing they come back and say they think it's slightly odd, but I don't think it actually matters. It doesn't affect anything. And the issue that they think is a little odd, or the wording they think is a little odd, is to do with, just as I think health and safety over the past 10 years has developed a much greater awareness amongst businesses, employers, employees, and everybody, I think, is much more conscious of that. Risk management is not so well, is not at the same level of maturity, in my opinion. And what we need is a council-wide approach to risk management, not just a single committee. So how do we implement the council's obligations to manage risk at the same time as we sort of imbue a spirit of risk management? And so the first key point about setting direction and monitoring progress of a risk management framework, the words that strike people as odd is the setting direction. But the intention was that we give, through this, through our own full council behaviour, we give support to Harry and ELT over, we need to be risk aware. needs to be part of our breathing and functioning. So it wasn't necessarily that we were going to go out and trailblaze or anything like that. But anyway, people say that the wording is something odd, but they don't think it actually matters. In terms of real workload, a assurance and risk committee spends a reasonable amount of time looking at legal risk. We have more legal obligations as a council, I suspect, than just about anybody on earth. How are we making sure that we're complying with them all? Now, you can't make sure you're complying with them all, but you do need to be aware of which are the ones that might come and bite us on the bottom if we're not paying attention to. So it's very much around that sort of issue, as well as thinking about the other things that you would normally find on a risk register, for example. You know, on a day-to-day basis, are we being conscious of the sorts of things that might give us a $500,000 bill if we don't think about it now? Comments, councillors? I'm sorry, yes.
Just let on the line.
Yes, I think it's a really good idea because we do have a lot of compliance issues and things like that too. People we don't comply with. So I guess in terms of prioritising the risks of, well, really, do have to take, but try and get some handle on that advice.
So can you remove adoption of the annual report?
Sorry, I was just looking at we had that discussion about putting in the finance to recommend about the annual report, and that was replicated here. So I've just suggested we remove the recommendation to adopt the annual report from this terms of reference.
The CEO Employment Committee, one of the things that
I'll stand aside from this one.
Oh, sorry.
On the insurance facility.
Yes, please.
The interim and final audit make sure the process is well managed and audit findings are addressed. That's business as usual. So I wouldn't be bringing everything to this committee. I think it's more that the audit management letter is brought to the committee, audit findings.
Yeah.
Just
Right.
the external.
Right. Can you work with?
I'll work with Amy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Karen.
On page 53, I have been concerned that, I mean, this goes across many councils. We have a thing called the CEO Review Committee. A council has broader employment responsibilities just reviewing the CE. There are good employer requirements. There are a number of other things that, you know, responsible employers do. And I was keen that we would capture those, whilst not overlooking all of the things that this committee has to do, including regular reviews and feedback, etc. But so therefore it has a slightly different flavour, I think, than possibly the previous terms of reference. But I don't think there's anything there that's particularly unusual. Has anybody noticed anything, please? Okay, it's your committee. Do you have any?
I thought that this is how it was, and I think it's standard, pretty standard.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Descriptive.
So if we move to the hearings committee in terms of reference, which possibly meets occasionally, when did it meet last?
So it's usually when we do
Needed 3 years, didn't meet the last.
no, we did one on the lighting rule. We did a variation. We had private plan changes. So you know, it probably once, twice a year. Russ?
Yeah, but there hasn't been any councillor involvement.
So the history, the South Wairarapa has been one of conversation with commissioners, that we shouldn't have potential of having where councillors may see the need of more involvement and overview.
It's as needed.
You'll notice under the membership something that's going to be rather tricky to do in the very short term, because the membership says up to 3 RMA Making Good Decisions accredited
I'm that big to be three people.
members. And at the moment, we have one. Now, the chief executive and I are about to write, in fact, we've started the process, we're about to write a letter of complaint to the Ministry for the Environment and the Minister for the Environment, pointing out that because they are the people who offer the courses and they just don't appear to be doing it in any way regularly, considering the large turnover of councils we've had and many other councils, unless they get off their backsides and start delivering these courses, we're not ever going to be able to meet our requirements.
Yeah.
Let's hope that has a little effect. Resource management hearing panels, terms of reference.
So when it says making good decisions, do you, as the mayor, do you have to have that course as well to sit on that committee?
Well, I would like to do it as well, just to
And
cast any.
I would like to,
Yes, thank you.
just because I feel like I don't have enough money.
Oh.
No, but I would like to actually do this course.
I would like you to.
Yeah. I didn't declare a conflict of interest with the next one. Oh no, it's not the next one, sorry. Sorry, it's a district licensing one, which sorry, was just mentioned in this one, but because it's not, it's just that I have my duty manager's license, but I can still talk to, but what it would mean is, yeah, so while I continue working in that area, I wouldn't be able to sit on that, but there are, other committees like the hearing committee that I could sit on, so
Okay, well, just deal with the resource management hearing panels.
Oh, yeah.
Anything Russell wants to add?
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of you're looking at hearings committee, it's a resource management hearings panel.
Yeah.
So you seem to have captured
Hello,
by making good decisions. The hearings committee. Yeah.
It's the one that's,
Next page.
yeah.
Yeah.
Next page, you carry it.
Okay, good.
Right, so now we come to the district licensing committee.
Here it is.
This is one you don't want to be part of.
Oh, no, I can't
You can.
because so I would never be able to sit because it's sit on it as a conflict of interest, but to talk to it.
I had thought councillor Paulie wasn't able to sit either, but I've been corrected since.
Well, no, I think I would like to.
Yeah.
In terms of having 15 years of running a licensed establishment with the bar and winery and so it's what been at the other side of it.
Yeah.
So
We're proposing that you be the deputy chair.
sorry,
Yeah, what does TBC actually mean?
So
we've got a paper later on the agenda about all this.
Have we?
Yeah,
I think we should defer this.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to this later then.
yeah.
Is that you, Rick?
Yep.
Formal report in the city process.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Right, okay. we'll
Is it-
come to that.
After TBC, is that appointed by the territorial authority? Is it the?
That's the next page that Rick's.
Yeah, all right.
Further on there, Jeb, we've got appointments to the district licensing
Yeah.
committee. There's a whole report on that.
Yeah.
And Rick is chomping at the bit to it.
Good.
Right. So if we
All right.
Take a break.
go back to page 31, please. We've had a very long discussion on the terms of reference. And we haven't had such a long discussion on the schedule of meetings, but we have picked it up from time to time. So whilst Colin's not here, I move that we adopt the terms of reference and the schedule of meeting. Do I have a seconder? I do. Councillor Gray
Hang on, so you have
Any-
Sorry.
as
Sorry?
amended.
Are you happy? Do you want me to read out all the changes before you move that?
I'll read them.
No.
As amended in the district.
Okay, fine.
Happy.
No, we've got
Sorry.
Yep. So
say something about that, that they'll get together. Oh, no, yeah.
comments on the recommendations?
I thought you.
There being none, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. To delegate to the chair the authority to alter the schedule following consultation with the chief executive. I move that. Councillor Plummer seconds. Any comments, thoughts? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Right. Okay, number 3. Attention, authorise officers to remove committee delegations from the financial delegations policy and add the following clause to the policy, which you can all read for yourself. I will move that. Councillor Plymouth seconds it. Any comments? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let's have lunch.
Done. Still on the agenda.
Yeah,